From the smell of singed carpet to the sight of shattered acrylic, 1980s playrooms were literal minefields. These are some dangerous 1980s British toys that are banned today. It's a miracle anyone survived their childhoods with these around. The Shattering Terror. Clackers. Walking onto a 1980s playground, you didn't hear birdsong. You heard the rhythmic, deafening crack, crack, crack of two heavy acrylic balls colliding at terminal velocity. Clackers were a rite of passage that usually ended up at a trip to the school nurse. You'd loop the string over your finger and try to get the rhythm, praying you didn't mistime a swing and take a solid lump of plastic directly to the wrist bone. The bruising was deep, purple, and immediate. But the real danger was the fatigue. These weren't high-grade aerospace materials. They were cheap, brittle acrylic. After a few thousand impacts, the internal stress became too much. Without warning, the ball would disintegrate into jagged, razor-sharp shards that sprayed out like a fragmentation grenade. 1 second you were the king of the playground, the next, you were dodging flying plastic shrapnel. By the time the Department of Trade and Industry stepped in, the clacker-knuckle was a national epidemic. If you thought the ground was dangerous, wait until you see the steel rain falling from the clouds. Aerial assassin. In the 80s, someone decided that giving children foot-long metal spears and telling them to throw them at a plastic hoop was a family activity. These weren't blunt toys, they were weighted javelins with steel tips designed to pierce the turf and stay upright. The problem was the flight path. You'd hurl one of these 3-pound assassins into the sky, and everyone in the garden would just look up and pray. There was zero trajectory control. If a gust of wind caught those fins, that metal spike was coming down on whatever or whoever was beneath it. By 1988, after thousands of emergency room visits and several tragic fatalities, they were finally banned from sale in the UK under the toys safety regulations. You were essentially playing a high-stakes game of don't get impaled in your own back gardens. It was a terrifying era where the toy section was indistinguishable from a medieval armory, and the hospital stats proved it. Another nightmare came from the colorful fabric wrapped around your wrist. The finger cramping hazard. Slap bracelets. Every primary school kid in the late 80s wanted a slap bracelet. It was the ultimate cool accessory. A flat, colorful strip of fabric that you'd whip against your wrist, watching it magically curl into a bangle. But the magic was actually a lethal piece of repurposed spring steel. The manufacturing was bottom of the barrel. The thin nylon of plastic coating would wear through within days of constant slapping. Once that fabric frayed, you were left with a raw, razor-sharp metal edge. You were essentially hitting yourself with a rusted tape measure at high speeds. Teachers started noticing the red, welted lines and deep longitudinal cuts on pupils' wrists as the exposed steel acted like a serrated blade. Schools across Britain banned them almost overnight as the slap turned into a slice. It was the first time our fashion choices actually tried to take a layer of skin off, leading to mass confiscations in classrooms nationwide. The chemical lung. Super elastic bubble plastic. Nothing says 1980s childhood quite like the dizzying industrial stench of super elastic bubble plastic. It came in a tiny metal tube that looked like model glue, and frankly, the contents weren't much different. You'd squeeze a glob of this toxic-smelling iridescent goo onto the end of a thin plastic straw and blow. What followed was a shimmering, sticky balloon made of pure solvents and plasticizers. The smell was overpowering, a chemical cocktail that filled living rooms and left kids feeling lightheaded after just one bubble. You were essentially huffing industrial vapors under the guise of playtime. If the bubble popped on your face, it left a plasticky residue that felt like a second skin and took ages to scrub off. Health authorities eventually flagged the high levels of ethyl acetate, the same stuff used in nail polish remover. It was a literal solvent abuse kit sold in newsagents for 50 pence, leaving an entire generation with memories of a very specific, nauseating chemical high. From toxic fumes in the living room, we moved to a doll that actually had a taste for human hair. The Cannibal Doll. Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kid. The Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kid was supposed to be the pinnacle of interactive play, but it quickly turned into a horror movie. These dolls featured motorized mechanical jaws, designed to chew on plastic carrots and chips. The terrifying flaw? They didn't have an off switch, and they couldn't tell the difference between a toy snack and a child's finger or hair. Once those internal rollers started tugging, they wouldn't let go. Parents reported horrific incidents of children being scalped or having their fingers crushed as the doll relentlessly chewed its way up a ponytail. Over 500,000 of these mechanical biters were pulled from shelves in early '97 after investigators realized the one-way rollers were a physical threat to kids. It was a mechanical predator in a pinafore dress that genuinely traumatized a generation of toddlers. If these memories are hitting a nerve, hit like and subscribe so we can have more awesome videos keep coming your way. Cap guns, die-cast revolvers. In the 80s, playing soldiers meant handling actual explosives. Forget the flimsy plastic orange guns of today, you had heavy, die-cast metal revolvers that felt like the real deal. They used rolls of red paper caps infused with real gunpowder. You'd load the reel, pull the trigger, and a tiny hammer would strike the paper, creating a deafening crack and a cloud of acrid sulfur smoke. If you got too enthusiastic, the metal barrel would get hot enough to leave a blister on your thumb. The danger wasn't just the burns, it was the proximity. You'd hold these things inches from your face, resulting in ringing ears and singed eyelashes. Sometimes a roll would misfire and ignite all at once, sending a literal flash of fire toward your hand. They were eventually reclassified under stricter noise and fire hazard regulations. But for a while, every suburban street in Britain smelled like a Napoleonic battlefield on a Saturday afternoon. Then there was a silent trap waiting to wrap around your throat. The synthetic chokehold, yo-ball. The yo-ball looked like innocent fun, a squishy water-filled ball on a long hyper-elastic rubber string. You'd loop the end over your finger and throw it, watching it bounce back like a yo-yo on steroids. But the marketing fun masked a deadly design flaw. That stretchy tether could extend up to 3 or 4 feet, and when it snapped back, it didn't just return to your hand, it whipped around whatever was in its path. In 2003, the UK government issued an emergency ban after dozens of near-miss reports from terrified parents. These toys were acting as high-speed garrotes, wrapping tightly around children's necks during play. Because the rubber was so grippy and elastic, it became almost impossible for a panicked child to untangle themselves. It was a silent, synthetic trap that turned a sunny afternoon in the park into a life-threatening emergency in seconds, proving that even the softest toys could have a lethal edge. Our final toy involved a literal bucket of molten metal. The DIY Burn Ward, the 1980s casting kits. Long before 3D printers, if a kid wanted new toy soldiers, they had to manufacture them from scratch using molten lead. These casting kits were essentially Junior's first foundry. The process was terrifyingly casual. You'd take a ladle of scrap lead, hold it over an open kitchen flame or a specialized heating element until it turned into a shimmering, liquid puddle, and then pour it into a cold metal mold. We're talking about 9-year-olds handling metal heated to over 300 degrees Celsius in their bedrooms. The risk of a steam explosion if the mold was damp was massive, sending droplets of liquid fire onto skin and carpets. Then there were the invisible hazards, the sweet, heavy scent of lead fumes filling unventilated houses. By today's standards, it's a health and safety nightmare involving toxic heavy metals and third-degree burns. Yet in the 80s, it was just another productive Saturday morning. It was a gritty, high-heat hobby that left you with a shelf full of soldiers and a permanent fear of the stove. If you could go back to that lawless toy box for 1 hour, would you actually risk playing with any of it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.